the Roach, and it gets extra damage against biological units, and it heals so quickly that you need...
Zerglings are almost useless.
Yeah, Zerglings are almost useless against this. It's so good against infantry-style units. So, Zerg versus Zerg, we might just see Roach versus Roach battles.
It'll be like Vulture versus Vulture, except with nothing after it.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's... I don't think that's too good for the health of the game to drop it down to one unit like that, because in Zerg versus Zerg right now, even though it's down to 3 units, it's one of the highest skill matchups in the game. As you can see, Jadong, the best Zerg player in the world currently, has an 80% win percentage in Zerg vs. Zerg, which is the highest of anyone in any matchup. So it shows that it really takes a lot of skill, a lot of micromanagement. But if it's just a bunch of roaches, I mean, imagine for a moment, you know, every player has a weak matchup, right? What's your weak matchup, for instance?
Terran versus Terran.
Terran versus Terran. See, wouldn't you give almost anything to be able to use just Protoss against Terran?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, imagine playing in Starcraft 2 and your weak matchup is Zerg.
Mm-hmm.
You can just choose Zerg and make roaches. So, you know, I don't know. It seems to me like that matchup's going to be a little bit broken with that unit. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And you're not going to, because even if it is just Muta and Ling, you still have a lot of micro in it with the Patrol micro versus Scourge and Zergling versus Zergling, just because melee on melee is always more micro dependent. But you can see it in Vulture versus Vulture battles. You just kind of attack move and maybe you target if they don't, maybe you don't. And a lot of the time you just mess yourself up if you try too hard. So I think Roach versus Roach would end up a lot like that. You just attack move.
Yeah, there might be some, you know, surface area type things going on.
Who has a bigger arc, but other
that's about it. So, you know, that matchup might be a little bit broken right now. Who knows? But, so, really, we just went over the Zerg matchups right now. You know, Zerg versus Terran, it looks like Terran can't expand quite as easily right now. You know, this is theory that we're going over, so, you know, the beta isn't quite out yet, but we're getting excited. We want to talk some theory on it. It looks like Zerg versus Protoss, the Muse might come into play big time, and it looks like Zerg versus Zerg is going to be a Roach battle. So, you know, this other matchup that we should be talking about right now, well, there's 3 more: Protoss versus Protoss, Terran versus Terran, and the Terran versus Protoss. And Terran versus Protoss, let's go into that first. And Terran versus Protoss, it looks, from what I've read, like it's going to be exactly opposite. You know, you mentioned that Terran against Zerg, you like to go into Banshees into Mechanic. And although recently in Pro Starcraft we've seen a lot of Mechanic against Zerg, the mechanical units from the factory are a new invention. It's mostly been bionic units, the Marines, the Medics, the Fire Bats used against Zerg. But in StarCraft 2, I mean, you've already noticed that, you know, you kind of need that Flame Vulture to deal with Zerglings. And it looks to me like against Protoss you're going to want to use more of the infantry units.
Yeah,
you know, the Marauder.
They're very strong because it has the same kind of dynamic that Tank Vulture versus Zealot Goon has.
Yeah.
Because like Vultures, right, Zealots and Dragoons or tanks are really good against Dragoons. Well, here you have it with the Marauders with their stun grenade. The Zealots don't even get there before they die because they're slowed down so much. And then the Stalkers, they don't really do great damage. It's kind of like Dragoons versus Marines, except now you don't have the range advantage, so you can't micro against them. So it's very tricky for Protoss to deal with a hard bio rush.
Yeah, and so I guess Terran can be a little bit more aggressive than that. That's going to be played out more like Terran against Zerg is nowadays. But the other interesting thing is I don't think you even have the option to play as you did in StarCraft 1 because the Siege tank now is not nearly as good as it was in StarCraft 1, is it? It costs more, it costs more supply, it does less damage sometimes more damage, but it's kind of a weird unit. But it's a higher tech unit too, kind of, you know, it's going to be really hard to get up to that as quickly as before.
And you lose the mines with the Vulture equivalent. So even if they're still good against Zealots, and it seems like Flamethrowers might be, if you don't have the mines, then they're still half as useful.
That's true, with no mines, that's getting a little bit scared. And
have fun with Terran.
Oh, I know, right? The DT is coming back, though.
Yep.
And this time they're giving it 2 swords. Yeah, I can't. Did you know the DT is actually going to do more damage now?
So I guess a double upgrade, the +1 is actually +2 and that kind of thing?
No, they just, the animation says 2 swords. I'm just being facetious, so I'm sorry. But really, you know, the DT, from what I've read, it takes longer to get to the tech of DT.
I think they added an extra building in there, the Dark
Obelisk. I believe you're right on that. And that's actually a good thing because the ComSat scanner has added another building to get there as well. You can't build the Academy thing that let you get the ComSat until after a factory now.
And with no mines, you'd be stuck with nothing but turrets and trying to turret push against DTs.
Yeah, no, that's not something anyone wants to have to experience. It is a painful thing to do. But one thing I have to say that, just look at this grin right here, all right? Scan is only going to cost 25 mana. That's what they have it at right now. 25 energy for a scan.
Well, that's because you have to balance it against the mule call down thing and whatever else, because it's all going to be from the same pool.
That's right. What do you think about those new mechanics from each race? We have Zerg is going to get 5 extra larvae from their queen. Protoss is going to be able to use a pylon that only costs 50 minerals more right now to speed up the probes a little bit, to mine one more per gather. And Terran is going to get some mules from like 20 BC to help mine a little bit quicker.
Well, I still think that taking out the MBS and the auto mine and going back to the Starcraft 1 interface, I think that's the ideal solution. But it kind of seems like that's out of the realm of possibility now. And as it is, a mechanic like this is the next best thing. Since you have the things like warp in and the add-ons for Terran building stuff to make it a little bit harder to actually produce units. And you have this to require a little more attention on your economy. I think it could balance out a bit. But one thing I'm worried about is Zerg doesn't really seem equivalent to Terran Protoss. You get the extra larva, but they don't have an equivalent of warp in or anything else. So they're going to really have to tweak how the larva mechanics work to have the equivalent difficulty with the other races.
Yeah, but they do have the Nidus worm, right? So the Nidus worm, you're going to be able to put that anywhere basically. Yeah. And you can run an Ultralisk through a Nidus worm. But with the warp-in, you can only use gateway units, so I guess that really only leaves out the Colossus, which, I mean, the Colossus so far, everyone has said, you know, this unit is not that useful. And for Terran, only infantry units, so no Hellions and no tanks and no Thors can go and draw pods. So
they have an advantage in that area, but that doesn't really seem like it's part of the macro and economic management, so it seems like, I don't know, it wouldn't really be. I guess they can balance it out so it's the same for everyone, but it would be different kinds of things. So if that's okay, then it's fine. But if that's not what they're aiming for, then
you know, the MBS and Automine, for the competitive scene at least, really scared us a lot when we found out, you know what, StarCraft 2 is going to have this in it. We complained a lot. Blizzard's like, nah, we'll think about it, but they left it in. But it looks to me like they're doing a pretty good job with how to make it so that it's going to work out better. As you just said, the drop pods, the warp in. Because right now, let's talk about MBS for a moment. Say you have 3 gateways, right? And you want to make zealots. You can put them all in one hotkey, all 3 gateways. And then let's say the hotkey is 1, so you hit 1 and you want 3 zealots. You press Z, 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 Z. Or Z,
Z, Z, Z.
Yeah, I wanted 2 in the last one.